I'm Faith Mitchell, and at 51, I thought I had life figured out. My antique shop on Elmwood Avenue was my sanctuary, filled with treasures that whispered stories of forgotten romances and abandoned dreams. This particular October morning, I was cataloging a Victorian jewelry collection when the brutal truth hit me like a cold buffalo wind. My 52nd birthday was 3 weeks away, and I'd be spending it alone, surrounded by other people's memories instead of making my own. The emerald necklace in my hands felt heavier than it should have. Each piece in this collection had belonged to someone who'd loved passionately, lived boldly. What the hell had I been doing with my life? Playing it safe, building walls higher than the ones in my federal-style shop, keeping everyone at arm's length? My phone buzzed. A text from my assistant canceling again. Perfect. Another evening of Chinese takeout and vintage wine, pretending I preferred solitude to connection. That's when I heard her voice through the shop window. I can't afford the entry fee, but I need that prize money. The woman outside was talking to someone on her phone, pacing back and forth. My landlord's not exactly the patient type. I found myself drawn to the window. She had blonde hair catching the afternoon sun, worn jeans that had seen better days, and hands that moved expressively as she spoke. There was something raw about her determination, something I'd lost somewhere along the way. "The Buffalo Marathon?" she continued. "Yeah, I know it's in 2 weeks. No, I've never run 26 miles before, but how hard can it be?" Before I knew what I was doing, I was outside. "Excuse me," my voice sounded foreign to my own ears. "Did you say the Buffalo Marathon?" She turned, and damn if her blue eyes didn't stop me cold. There was fire there, desperation mixed with hope. "Yeah. Sorry, was I being too loud?" "Not at all. I was just... Are you really planning to run without training?" She laughed, but it held no humor. "Lady, I'm a textile craftsman. My idea of cardio is climbing stairs to my studio, but 15 grand would solve a lot of problems." Something shifted inside my chest. Maybe it was her honesty, or maybe it was the way she stood like she was ready to fight the world with nothing but stubborn will. "What's your name?" Ariana Baker." "Faith Mitchell." I extended my hand, and when she shook it, her palm was rough with calluses. Real hands. Hands that created things. "Want to grab coffee? I have a crazy idea." An hour later, we were standing at the marathon registration booth together. The volunteer looked between us like we'd lost our minds. "You want to register? Today? The race is in 2 weeks." I pulled out my credit card. 2 entries, please." Ariana grabbed my wrist. "Faith, you don't have to pay for me. Consider it an investment in mutual insanity." The volunteer shrugged and processed our forms. When she handed us our race packets, Ariana stared at hers like it might bite her. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. I looked at this woman, who'd somehow convinced me to sign up for 26 miles of potential humiliation, and for the first time in years, I felt truly alive. Because sometimes you have to run towards something, even when you don't know what you're chasing. Marathon morning arrived with weather that had no business being this damn hot in October. I stood at the starting line in my brand new running gear, looking like I'd stepped out of a sporting goods catalog. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd spent more on my outfit than most people spend on their cars, yet I still felt like a fraud among these lean, determined athletes. My Garmin watch beeped incessantly, reminding me of my pathetic training record. 2 weeks of sporadic jogs around Delaware Park hardly qualified as marathon preparation. What the hell had I been thinking? Somewhere in the crowd of 15,000 runners, Ariana was stretching. I'd spotted her earlier, wearing what looked like a hand-woven shirt that caught the morning light beautifully. While I'd obsessed over moisture-wicking fabrics and compression gear, she'd chosen something she'd made with her own hands. Typical. The starting gun fired, and we were off. Miles 1 through 10 weren't terrible. My expensive shoes cushioned each step, my heart rate monitor kept me in check, and I actually felt optimistic. I caught glimpses of Ariana ahead of me, her blonde ponytail swaying rhythmically. She ran like she wove textiles, with steady practiced movements. By mile 15, my legs felt like concrete. The October sun beat down mercilessly, turning Buffalo into a furnace. I stripped off my jacket, then my long-sleeved shirt, running in just my sports bra and shorts. Around me, other runners were wilting too. The medical tents were getting busy. Mile 20 hit me like a brick wall. Every step became an act of will. My expensive gear meant nothing now. I was just another struggling human being, questioning every life choice that had led me to this moment of voluntary torture. At mile 25, I could see the finish line banner in the distance. That's when I saw her. Ariana was stumbling, her usually graceful stride reduced to a desperate shuffle. She was maybe 50 yards ahead of me, but I could see her swaying dangerously. My own exhaustion forgotten, I pushed forward. "Ariana!" I called out, but my voice was barely a croak. She turned at the sound, her face flushed and confused. That's when her legs gave out completely. She went down hard, her knees hitting the asphalt just as my own strength finally abandoned me. I collapsed right beside her, our bodies tangling together as we both hit the ground yards from the finish line. The world spun around us. I could hear volunteers shouting, feet running toward us. But all I could focus on was Ariana's labored breathing next to my ear. Her arm was draped across my back, and I could feel the dampness of her sweat mixing with mine. "Did we make it?" she whispered against my shoulder. "Close enough," I managed, tasting salt and exhaustion. The medical tent was a blur of concerned faces and cold towels. They separated us onto different cots, but I kept craning my neck to check on her. A volunteer pressed a bottle of water into my hands. "You two came in together," she said with a smile. "Quite the dramatic finish." Ariana was sitting up on the next cot, her color returning to normal. When she caught me looking, she raised her water bottle in a mock toast. "To mutual insanity," she said, echoing my words from registration day. I laughed, surprising myself. "To finishing what we started." That's when I noticed what she was wearing. Her shirt wasn't just hand-woven, it was a masterpiece. The pattern seemed to shift and flow like water, incorporating threads I'd never seen before. "Did you make that?" I asked. She looked down at herself. "This old thing?" "Yeah, it's just something I was experimenting with." Just something. This woman had created wearable art and called it just something. I fingered my own synthetic running shirt, suddenly aware of how mass-produced and soulless it felt. "It's beautiful," I said, meaning it. "Thanks." She was studying my vintage Omega watch, the one I'd inherited from my grandfather. "That's a 1962nd Speedmaster, isn't it? You know watches? I know craftsmanship when I see it." We sat there in comfortable silence, sharing water and catching our breath. Around us, other runners celebrated their victories or nursed their defeats, but something was happening between us that had nothing to do with the marathon. This collapse at the finish line had broken down walls I didn't even know I'd built. 3 days after the marathon, I found myself walking up the creaky stairs to Ariana's studio. I'd told myself this was purely business, commissioning a textile piece for my shop's fall display. But as I climbed those worn wooden steps, my heart was beating faster than it had during our 26-mile disaster. Her studio occupied the 3rd floor of an old brick building in the Elmwood Village. The door was painted deep blue, with small glass panels that revealed glimpses of hanging fabrics and golden afternoon light. I knocked, suddenly nervous. "It's open," came her voice from inside. I stepped into what felt like another world. Looms of various sizes filled the space, some holding half-finished pieces that looked like captured sunsets. Yarns in every conceivable color hung from wooden pegs along the walls. The air smelled of wool and something indefinably creative. Ariana was seated at the largest loom, her back to me. She wore a simple white tank top that showed the elegant curve of her shoulders as she worked. Her blonde hair was twisted up with what looked like a wooden knitting needle, exposing the graceful line of her neck. "Be right with you," she said, not turning around. "Just finishing this section." I watched her hands move across the threads with practiced precision. There was something hypnotic about the rhythm, the way she seemed to know exactly which color came next without even looking. The piece she was working on reminded me of storm clouds gathering over Lake Erie. "That's gorgeous," I said softly. She turned then, and when she saw it was me, her face lit up with genuine pleasure. "Faith, what brings you to my humble chaos?" "I was hoping to commission something for my shop. Maybe a large wall hanging for the front window." She stood, wiping her hands on a cloth. "Really? What did you have in mind?" I hadn't actually thought this through. Something that would complement antique furniture. Maybe earth tones or we could do something completely unexpected. Her eyes sparked with mischief. When was the last time you surprised your customers? She moved to a corner where finished pieces hung like flags of conquered territories. Each one was completely different, showing a range that took my breath away. This is incredible work, Ariana. You're an artist. She shrugged, but I caught the pleased flush on her cheeks. I just play with threads until they behave. Don't do that. Do what? Diminish what you do. This isn't playing, this is mastery. She studied my face for a moment, as if trying to determine whether I was serious. You really think so? I know so. I've been around beautiful things my entire career. This belongs in a gallery, not hidden away up here. Something shifted in the air between us. The compliment had opened a door neither of us had expected. Would you like to try? She asked suddenly. Try what? Weaving. Just something simple. Before I could object, she was guiding me to a smaller loom, positioning me on the bench seat. She stood behind me, her arms coming around to guide my hands to the threads. Feel the tension here, she murmured, her breath warm against my ear. Too tight and it'll pucker, too loose and the pattern falls apart. Her hands covered mine, directing my movements. I could feel the heat of her body against my back, smell the faint scent of her shampoo mixed with the wool fibers. My expensive manicure looked ridiculous against the rough beauty of the threads. Like this? I asked, my voice coming out huskier than intended. Perfect. Her hands lingered on mine longer than necessary. You're a natural. I turned my head slightly and found her face inches from mine. Those blue eyes I'd admired at the marathon were studying my mouth with unmistakable interest. Ariana? I said softly. Yeah? But I couldn't finish the thought because she was already leaning closer, and then her lips were touching mine. Soft, tentative, asking a question I hadn't known I wanted to answer. The kiss lasted only seconds, but it changed everything. When we broke apart, her cheeks were flushed pink, and I felt like I'd been struck by lightning. I should go, I whispered, not moving. Should you? This is complicated. Most good things are. I stood up so quickly I nearly knocked over the loom. I'll call you about the commission. She watched me gather my purse and jacket, making no move to stop me. Faith? I paused at the door. Yeah? For what it's worth, I'm glad you crashed into me at that finish line. I drove home through the darkening Buffalo streets, my lips still tingling from that brief contact. At 51, I thought I was done being surprised by life, done feeling that flutter of anticipation in my chest. Apparently, I was wrong about a lot of things. Back in my empty house, surrounded by my carefully curated antiques, I touched my mouth and wondered what the hell I was getting myself into. And for the first time in years, I didn't care about having all the answers. 2 days later, I showed up at Ariana's studio with an armload of expensive art supplies. Silk threads from Japan, wool from Scotland, tools I'd researched for hours online. I told myself it was just good business practice, supporting local artisans. But the truth was, I couldn't stop thinking about that kiss. Faith? Ariana's voice carried surprise and something else I couldn't identify. What's all this? Supplies, for the commission. I set the packages on her work table, suddenly feeling foolish. I thought maybe you could use some higher quality materials. She picked up a skein of silk thread, examining the label. This costs more than I make in a week. So I can't accept this. Why not? Because I'm not a charity case. Her voice had an edge now. I don't need you swooping in with your credit card, trying to fix my life. That's not what I'm doing. Isn't it? She crossed her arms. Rich lady feels sorry for the struggling artist, throws money at the problem. Makes you feel better about yourself. The accusation stung because there was truth in it. Maybe I just wanted to help. Help or control. What's that supposed to mean? It means you're used to buying solutions. You paid for my marathon entry, now you're buying me supplies. What's next, Faith? You gonna pay my rent too? I felt heat rising in my cheeks. You're being unfair. Am I? Because from where I stand, it looks like you're trying to turn me into some kind of kept woman. That's not. I stopped, took a breath. You're right, I'm sorry, I'm not good at this. At what? Caring about someone without trying to manage them. The anger in her eyes softened slightly. Is that what this is? Caring? I looked around her studio, at the beautiful chaos of her creative life, then back at her face. I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since that kiss. So you brought me presents. So I panicked and defaulted to what I know, money, things. It's easier than feelings. She moved closer, her voice gentler now. What are you so afraid of? This, you. The way you make me feel like I'm 17 again. And how's that? Terrified and exhilarated at the same time. She reached up and touched my cheek. Good. Fear means it matters. This time when she kissed me, I didn't pull away. Her mouth was warm and insistent, tasting faintly of coffee and possibility. My hands found her waist, pulling her closer as months of careful control finally cracked open. We stumbled backward until I was pressed against her work table, yarn spilling to the floor around us. Her hands tangled in my hair, messing up my perfect styling, and I didn't care. For once in my life, I didn't care about appearances or propriety or what anyone might think. Your place or mine. She whispered against my lips. Here, I said, surprising us both. She led me to the small daybed tucked in the corner of the studio, surrounded by half-finished tapestries that caught the late afternoon light. We moved together with an urgency that spoke of weeks of denied attraction, her hands mapping the planes of my body while mine discovered the softness of her skin. In that space, filled with the tools of her trade, we found a rhythm as old as time itself, our bodies creating their own intricate pattern of desire and fulfillment. Afterward, we lay tangled together on her narrow bed, my head on her shoulder, her fingers tracing lazy circles on my bare arm. This changes things, I said quietly. Does it have to? I lifted my head to look at her. I'm 51, Ariana. You're 34, we're in completely different places in our lives. So? So this was probably a mistake. She went very still beneath me. A mistake. I didn't mean... No, you're right. She sat up, reaching for her clothes. Mistake, got it. Ariana, please. You should go, Faith. Her voice was carefully neutral now. I have work to finish. I dressed quickly, feeling like the worst kind of coward. At the door, I turned back. She was sitting at her loom again, but her hands weren't moving. The supplies? I said lamely. Keep them. I'm sure you'll find another struggling artist to rescue. I left her there among her threads and colors, and drove home through the buffalo twilight feeling like I'd just thrown away something precious. But that was the thing about precious things, wasn't it? They scared me more than anything else in the world. The cream-colored invitation arrived 3 weeks after I'd walked out of Ariana's studio like a damn fool. Rebecca Chen Morrison, my college roommate, was getting married, and apparently my presence was requested at the celebration of love in Rochester. The irony wasn't lost on me. Rebecca and I had been more than roommates 20 years ago. We'd shared everything, including a relationship that had felt like the most natural thing in the world until her parents found out. She'd chosen safety over truth, marrying her economics professor and building a perfect heterosexual life while I'd retreated into my antiques and careful solitude. I stared at the invitation, remembering Rebecca's soft laugh, her way of making everything feel possible. Then I thought about Ariana's blue eyes and the hurt I'd put there, and suddenly Rochester seemed like the perfect escape from my own cowardice. You're running away, I told my reflection as I packed my overnight bag. But running had worked for 20 years. Why stop now? The wedding was exactly what I'd expected. Picture-perfect ceremony in a historic mansion, Rebecca radiant in white silk, her new husband beaming like he'd won the lottery. I sat in the back, nursing a champagne flute and wondering what the hell I was doing there. Faith Mitchell? My goodness, you haven't changed a bit. I turned to find a striking woman with dark hair and intelligent brown eyes. She wore her cocktail dress like armor and had the confident bearing of someone accustomed to getting what she wanted. I'm Claire Morrison, David's sister. Rebecca's told me so much about you. All good things, I hope. She said you were the one who got away. Claire's smile had teeth, her words not mine. The reception was held in the mansion's ballroom, all crystal chandeliers and marble floors. I found myself seated at a table with other college friends, making polite conversation while Claire positioned herself strategically nearby. Every time I looked up, she was watching me with obvious interest. "So you own an antique shop," she said during the main course. "How wonderfully bohemian." "Not particularly bohemian, just old things that have outlasted their original owners. Like us?" Her laugh was practiced, professional. "I'm an art curator in Manhattan. We should definitely stay in touch." "Should we?" "I have excellent instincts about people, Faith. And my instincts tell me we have a lot in common." I excused myself to get some air on the terrace. The November night was crisp, and I welcomed the cold after the stifling atmosphere inside. That's where Rebecca found me. Hiding out here? She looked exactly the same, just more polished around the edges. Congratulating myself on my excellent timing. Beautiful ceremony. Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would. We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the lights of Rochester spread out below us. "Are you happy?" I asked. "Most days. David's a good man. He loves me." "That's not what I asked." She sighed. "I'm content, Faith. It's not the same thing, but it's enough." "Is it?" "I chose stability over passion 20 years ago. I can't change that now." "Your sister-in-law seems interested in getting to know me better." Rebecca's expression darkened. "Claire collects people like art pieces. Beautiful objects to display at dinner parties." "Sounds familiar." "Don't." Her voice was sharp. "Don't do what I did. Don't choose the safe option because it's easier." "What makes you think I have options?" "The way you keep checking your phone, the way you've been distracted all evening. Someone's gotten under your skin." I thought about Ariana's hands on my body, the way she'd looked at me like I was something worth having. "Her name's Ariana. She's 34, brilliant, and I screwed it up." "Then fix it." "It's complicated." "Everything worthwhile is complicated, Faith. The question is whether you're brave enough to fight for it." Claire appeared at my elbow like a well-dressed vulture. "Mind if I steal Faith for a dance?" Before I could object, she was leading me onto the dance floor. She moved with practiced grace, her hand firm on my back as we swayed to some generic wedding song. "You're incredibly attractive," she murmured in my ear, "and I'm very good at getting what I want." "What do you want?" "You. In my bed. Tonight." Her directness should have been appealing. Claire was sophisticated, successful, exactly the kind of woman I usually found attractive, but all I could think about was Ariana's calloused hands and the way she'd called my expensive gifts charity. I'm flattered, but no. "Because of this Ariana person Rebecca mentioned?" "Because I'm not interested." Her grip tightened slightly. "She's probably just using you for your money, you know. Young women like that always are." The accusation hit like a slap. "You don't know anything about her." "I know the type. Pretty little artist, struggling to make ends meet." Suddenly, a wealthy older woman shows interest, and miraculously she develops feelings. "You're wrong." "Am I? When's the last time someone wanted you for yourself, not your bank account?" I pulled away from her, my heart hammering. "This conversation is over. Think about it, Faith. A bird in the hand is worth two in the bush." I left the reception without saying goodbye, driving through the dark November night back to Buffalo. Claire's words echoed in my head, mixing with my own doubts until I couldn't separate truth from paranoia. But as the city lights came into view, Rebecca's advice rang louder. "Don't choose the safe option because it's easier." For once in my life, maybe it was time to choose the complicated, terrifying, beautiful option instead. I drove through the night, Claire's poisonous words clinging to me like smoke. The highway between Rochester and Buffalo had never felt longer, each mile giving my doubts more room to grow. By the time I reached the city limits, I'd convinced myself that maybe she was right. Maybe Ariana had seen dollar signs instead of genuine connection. But as I pulled into my driveway at 3 a.m, Rebecca's voice cut through the noise in my head. "Don't choose the safe option because it's easier." I sat in my car for 20 minutes, engine cooling, before I made the decision that would change everything. I drove to Ariana's building. Her studio windows glowed with warm light. At 3:30 in the morning, she was still working. I climbed those familiar stairs, my heart hammering against my ribs like it was trying to escape. I knocked softly. "Ariana? It's Faith." Silence. Then footsteps, and the door opened to reveal her face, eyes red-rimmed with exhaustion. She wore paint-stained jeans and an oversized sweater, and she'd never looked more beautiful. "It's the middle of the night," she said quietly. "I know. I just drove back from Rochester. And I need to tell you something." She stepped aside to let me in. The studio looked different, more chaotic than usual. Fabric scraps covered every surface, and 3 looms held partially completed pieces in various stages of distress. "Working late?" I asked. "Couldn't sleep. Funny thing about having your heart stomped on. Makes concentration difficult." "I deserve that. I'm sorry." "For which part? Calling me a mistake? Or disappearing for 3 weeks? For being a coward." I moved closer, noting the dark circles under her eyes, for letting fear make my decisions. She was working on something new, a tapestry that looked like a storm at sea. Dark blues and grays twisted together in patterns that spoke of turbulence and pain. "Is that about us?" I asked. "Everything's about us lately. Probably should diversify my inspiration. Ariana, I went to my ex's wedding tonight. Congratulations. I'm sure it was lovely. Her sister-in-law hit on me, aggressively. She looked up from her loom. And she said things about you, about us. Ugly things that I almost let myself believe." "What kind of things?" "That you were using me for money. That young women like you always are." Ariana's hands stilled on the threads. "I see. But then I remembered something, the way you looked at me that first day at the marathon registration. Before you knew I had money, before you knew anything about me except that I was crazy enough to sign up for a race with no training. Faith. You looked at me like I mattered. Not my bank account, not my expensive watch. Me." She turned fully toward me now, her blue eyes searching my face. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I've been an idiot. I'm saying I let 20 years of careful living make me afraid of the best thing that's happened to me in decades." "And what's that?" "You, this, whatever this is between us." She stood slowly, setting down her shuttle. "You hurt me, Faith. Really hurt me. I know. I don't let people in easily, and when I do, when I make myself vulnerable like that, I expect them to stay. Not run away the next morning calling it a mistake." "You're right." I panicked. "Why?" I looked around her studio, at the evidence of her talent and passion surrounding us. "Because you make me feel things I thought I was too old to feel. Because when I'm with you, I want to be brave. And brave has never been my strong suit." "What's changed?" "Nothing. Everything. I'm still terrified. But I realized tonight that losing you scares me more than taking a chance on us." She moved closer, close enough that I could smell the faint scent of wool and vanilla that always seemed to cling to her skin. "What exactly are you asking for, Faith?" "A chance to prove I'm not going anywhere this time. A chance to figure out what this is without me running away when it gets complicated. It will get complicated. I'm counting on it." She reached up and touched my cheek, her calloused fingers gentle against my skin. "I missed you. Even when I was furious with you, I missed you. I missed you too. More than I thought possible. Promise me something. Anything. Next time you get scared, talk to me instead of disappearing. I'm tougher than I look." I leaned into her touch. "I promise." This time when she kissed me, it felt like coming home. Her lips were soft and familiar, tasting of coffee and forgiveness. I pulled her closer, my hands tangling in her hair as 3 weeks of regret and longing poured into that kiss. When we finally broke apart, both of us were breathing hard. "It's almost dawn," she said. "Is that an invitation?" "It's a fact. I've been up all night, and you just drove 3 hours. We're both exhausted. But I don't want you to leave." I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. "Then I won't." She led me to her small daybed, and we lay down together, fully clothed, her head on my shoulder. Outside, Buffalo was waking up to a new day, but inside her studio, surrounded by the tools of her trade and the evidence of her talent, I finally felt like I was exactly where I belonged. The next few weeks changed everything about how I moved through the world. For the first time in years, I found myself holding hands in public, Ariana's fingers intertwined with mine as we walked down Elmwood Avenue. The stares didn't bother me as much as I'd expected. What surprised me was how natural it felt, like I'd been hiding a fundamental part of myself for decades. "You're different," my assistant remarked one afternoon as I arranged a display with unusual enthusiasm. "Happier." "Am I?" "Like someone turned on a light inside you." Ariana had that effect. She made ordinary moments feel significant. Coffee in the morning became a ritual worth savoring. Evening walks turned into adventures as she pointed out architectural details I'd never noticed despite living here for 20 years. "See how the ironwork curves there?" she'd say, stopping us in front of a Victorian house. "Someone spent hours hammering that by hand." Every twist tells a story. Everything was story to her. The worn steps of old buildings, the way light fell across brick facades, the patterns people wore without thinking. She saw beauty everywhere, and slowly, I began seeing it too. 3 weeks into our official relationship, she convinced me to take a weekend trip to a cabin near Finger Lakes. I'd rented the place sight unseen, trusting her judgment about needing time away from the city. The cabin was perfect. Rustic without being primitive, surrounded by trees just beginning to show their autumn colors. We arrived Friday evening, carrying bags of groceries and a bottle of wine I'd been saving for a special occasion. "This is incredible," Ariana said, stepping onto the deck that overlooked the lake. "Look at that water." I came up behind her, wrapping my arms around her waist. She leaned back against me, and I buried my face in her hair. The intimacy still felt new, something I was learning to accept instead of analyze. "Thank you for suggesting this," I said. "Thank you for saying yes." That night, we cooked dinner together in the small kitchen, working around each other with an ease that surprised me. She made pasta while I handled the salad, and we moved like we'd been doing this for years instead of weeks. "Can I ask you something?" she said as we settled on the couch with our wine. "Anything." "Why did it take you so long? To be open about who you are?" I considered the question, swirling wine in my glass. "Fear, mostly. I built my business in a conservative industry. Antiques, estate sales. A lot of my clients are older, traditional. I convinced myself it was just easier to keep my private life private. And now? Now I'm tired of hiding. Tired of pretending pieces of myself don't exist." She curled up against my side, her head on my shoulder. "I'm glad you're done pretending." The next morning, I woke to find her already up, sitting on the deck with her sketchbook. She was drawing the lake, her pencil capturing the way morning mist rose from the water. "How long have you been awake?" I asked, bringing her coffee. "Hour or so." The light was too good to miss. I settled beside her, watching her work. Her hands moved with sure strokes, creating depth and texture with simple graphite lines. "Will you teach me?" I asked impulsively. "To draw? To see things the way you do." She smiled, tearing out a fresh page. "Start with something simple. That tree there, the one with the twisted trunk." For the next hour, she guided my clumsy attempts at capturing what I saw. Her patience was infinite. Her encouragement genuine, even when my tree looked more like abstract art than nature. "You're thinking too hard," she said, her hand covering mine on the pencil. "Feel the shape instead of analyzing it." "I'm not good at feeling instead of thinking." "I've noticed." She kissed my temple. "But you're learning." That afternoon, we hiked to a waterfall she'd researched online. The trail was more challenging than I'd expected, but something about being in nature with her made the physical exertion feel worthwhile instead of torturous. At the waterfall, we found a flat rock perfect for sitting. The sound of rushing water filled the space around us, creating a natural privacy screen. "I love watching you discover things," she said, taking my hand. "What do you mean?" "The way you look when something surprises you. Like when you tasted my coffee that first morning, or when you realized you could actually draw that tree." "I'm not used to being surprised." "I know. That's what makes it beautiful." She leaned over and kissed me, soft and sweet at first, then deeper as I responded. The combination of cool air and warm skin, the sound of water and the taste of her mouth, created a sensory experience I wanted to memorize. We made love there beside the waterfall, our bodies finding rhythm against the soundtrack of rushing water. There was something primal about it, something that connected us to the natural world around us and to each other in ways that went beyond words. Her skin was warm against mine, her touch reverent and sure as we moved together in the dappled sunlight. Afterward, we lay tangled together on our discarded clothes, her head on my chest as my heartbeat gradually returned to normal. "I'm falling for you," she said quietly. "Hard." "Good," I replied, stroking her hair. "Because I'm already there." Sunday evening came too soon. As we packed our things, I felt reluctant to return to real life, to the complications and expectations waiting in Buffalo. "We have to go back," Ariana said, reading my expression. "I know. I just like this version of us." "What version?" "The one where nothing else matters except this." She zipped up her bag and came to where I stood by the window. "Faith, this is the real version. Everything else is just details we'll figure out as we go." On the drive home, her hand rested on my thigh as I drove, a simple touch that somehow contained all the promise of whatever came next. Back in Buffalo, reality hit with the subtlety of a freight train. My first indication that our relationship wouldn't exist in a comfortable bubble came Monday morning when Mrs. Ashworth, one of my oldest clients, stopped mid-sentence during our appointment. "Faith, dear, is that a woman's sweater in your office?" Ariana's cardigan hung over my chair where she'd left it Saturday morning after spending the night. I'd been so distracted by a shipment of Victorian jewelry that I hadn't noticed it. "Yes, it belongs to a friend." "I see." Her tone suggested she saw more than I'd intended to share. "Well, I do hope you're being careful. One can't be too cautious these days about the company one keeps." The conversation continued, but I caught her studying me with new interest. And by Wednesday, I'd heard through the antique dealer, Griprep Vine, that Faith Mitchell was going through some kind of phase. "Let them talk," Ariana said when I mentioned it over dinner. "Their opinions don't pay your bills." "Actually, they do. Half my business comes from referrals within that social circle. So you're going back in the closet to protect your profit margins?" "That's not fair, isn't it? Because from where I sit, it looks like you're more concerned about what those old biddies think than about us." I wanted to argue, but she had a point. The comfort I'd found in our weekend bubble was already cracking under the pressure of other people's expectations. The situation got more complicated when Ariana received a call that changed everything. "The Textile Arts Center wants to feature my work," she told me, practically vibrating with excitement. "It's a group show in Manhattan, but still, New York City, Faith, real exposure. That's incredible." "When?" "That's the thing. The installation period is 3 months, starting next week. They want me there for the opening and to give a workshop series." My stomach dropped. 3 months? I know it's terrible timing, but this is the break I've been working toward my entire career. I should have been thrilled for her. Instead, all I could think about was how this proved every fear I'd been nursing about our age difference and life stages. "Of course you have to go." "Do I?" "Because you don't exactly sound enthusiastic." "I'm trying to be supportive. Try harder." The fight that followed was ugly in the way that fights between people who love each other always are. She accused me of wanting to keep her small and dependent. I accused her of using our relationship as a stepping stone to something better. "You think I'm with you for your money and connections?" she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "Aren't you? This opportunity came through someone who knows someone who shops at my store. Damn you, Faith. Damn you for reducing everything we have to some kind of transaction. Maybe that's all it ever was." The words hung between us like poison. She stared at me for a long moment, then started gathering her things. "You know what? You're right. This was a mistake. We're in completely different places in our lives, wanting completely different things. Ariana, wait. No. I'm done waiting. I'm done trying to convince you that what we have is real. If you can't see it, that's your problem, not mine." She left, and I let her go. Because part of me believed she was right. Part of me believed I was too old, too set in my ways, too scared to deserve someone like her. I spent the next week telling myself I'd made the right decision. Better to end it now than drag out the inevitable. Better to accept that some things weren't meant to last. But the antique shop felt empty without her presence. The Victorian jewelry I'd been so excited about looked dull and lifeless. Even my house, with its carefully curated comfort, felt like a museum dedicated to a life I no longer wanted to live. Friday night, I found myself parked outside her building. Her studio windows were dark, and I realized she was probably already in New York, starting her new life without me. I sat there for an hour, trying to work up the courage to go upstairs and find out for sure. But courage had never been my strong suit, and by the time I finally got out of the car, I'd convinced myself it was too late for apologies. The next morning brought news that changed everything. My assistant handed me a newspaper folded to the art section. "Thought you'd want to see this." There was Ariana's photo next to a glowing preview of the textile exhibition. But it wasn't the article that caught my attention. It was the quote at the bottom. "This opportunity represents years of hard work paying off," she told the reporter. "I'm grateful to everyone who believed in my vision, especially those who challenged me to think bigger than I thought possible. Those who challenged me to think bigger." I read the quote 3 times before the truth hit me. She wasn't using me. She was crediting me with helping her grow. And I'd thrown it all away because I was too scared to believe I deserved something beautiful. I closed the shop early and drove to New York City like a woman possessed. The 3-hour drive gave me plenty of time to rehearse what I'd say, but by the time I reached Manhattan, all my carefully planned words had evaporated into pure panic. The Textile Arts Center was in Soho, a converted warehouse with soaring ceilings and exposed brick walls. Ariana's installation occupied the entire back wall, a massive piece that looked like captured storm clouds and sunlight. It was magnificent, powerful in a way that took my breath away. She stood in front of it, explaining the weaving technique to a small crowd of admirers. She wore a black dress I'd never seen before, and her hair was pulled back in an elegant twist. She looked sophisticated, successful, completely at home in this world. I almost lost my nerve. What was I doing here? She'd moved on, found her place among people who understood art and creativity. I was just a middle-aged antique dealer with commitment issues. But then she saw me. Our eyes met across the gallery, and everything else faded away. The crowd, the other artwork, the ambient chatter of the opening reception. Just her, looking at me with an expression I couldn't read. She excused herself from her admirers and walked over, her heels clicking on the polished concrete floor. "Faith, what are you doing here?" "Making the biggest gesture of my life, I hope." "Which is?" I reached into my purse and pulled out a small velvet box. Around us, conversations continued, wine glasses clinked, people admired art. But in our little bubble, the world had gone silent. "I've been thinking about time," I said. "How much of it I've wasted being afraid. How much of it I've spent collecting other people's memories instead of making my own. Faith. I know I screwed up. I know I let fear make decisions that love should have made. But I also know that losing you would be the biggest mistake of my life." I opened the box, revealing the Art Deco ring I'd chosen from my shop's finest collection. It had belonged to a woman who'd lived through the Depression, 2 wars, and 60 years of marriage. A woman who'd understood that love was worth fighting for. This isn't about age or timing or what other people think. This is about you and me, and the life we could build together if we're brave enough to try. Tears were streaming down her face now, and people were starting to notice our drama unfolding in front of her masterpiece. "Are you proposing to me at my art opening?" "I'm proposing to you at the moment when you're most yourself, surrounded by your work, in your element, absolutely magnificent." She laughed through her tears. "You realize everyone's staring. Let them stare. I'm done hiding who I am and who I love." "Who do you love, Faith?" "You. Completely, terrifyingly, forever you." She kissed me then, right there in front of God and everyone, her lips tasting of champagne and possibility. Around us, the crowd burst into spontaneous applause, and someone called out, "Say yes already!" "Yes," she whispered against my mouth. "Yes to all of it." 1 year later, we stood at the same marathon starting line where this whole beautiful mess had begun. This time, I wore one of Ariana's handwoven shirts, and she sported a vintage Omega watch that matched mine. We'd trained together, argued about pace, and somehow managed not to kill each other in the process. "Ready?" she asked, adjusting my race number. "For 26 miles of voluntary torture? Absolutely. For everything else?" I looked at my wife, this incredible woman who'd taught me that love was worth the risk, that beautiful things were worth fighting for, that sometimes the best adventures began with falling down together. Especially for everything else. The starting gun fired and we began running toward our future, hand in hand, stride perfectly matched. Behind us, Buffalo spread out in the morning light, the city where we'd found each other and learned that sometimes the most unexpected collisions lead to the most extraordinary destinations. At mile 26, we crossed the finish line together, exactly where we belonged.